Fun Ideas Productions presents the Fun Ideas Podcast. Hi, this is Mark Arnold, and welcome to Fun Ideas Podcast number 33. Alvin. The story of Ross Bagdasarian Sr. Liberty Records format films on The Alvin Show is out now. You can order your hardback, paperback, or ebook copies today on Amazon and at bearmanormedia.com. A reminder that I am scheduled to be on Stu's Show live on April 24th to discuss this book. I'm also appearing on Phil Hall's online movie show to discuss it as well. And I'm currently at work on the Total Television Scrapbook. I will give you more details about this in an upcoming episode. I will say that I recently got a number of exciting pictures about the underdog balloon that used to appear in Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Our guest today is an author, and he has written books on a wide variety of topics, including Jerry Lewis, Elvis Presley, Andy Clyde, Charlie Chan, James Cagney, Bob Hope, Gene Harlow, Mickey Rooney, Buster Keaton, Charlie Chase, Clint Eastwood, Charlie Chaplin, Jack Nicholson, Harry Langdon, and more. Here he is, James Neibaur. Hi, on the phone I have James Neibaur. How are you today?
Very well, how are you?
Fine. And I'm looking through your big laundry list of books, and you've written a lot of books about a lot of subjects that I like. So, which is good. I own a few of them. I didn't even realize I owned them. And I've heard...
that's like most people that own them say the same thing.
Yeah. And I've heard you a few times on Phil Hall's online movie show about some of your books. So
yeah.
I think the most recent one was probably either the Charlie Chan one or the Andy Clyde one. So
I did one on Thelma Todd, Zazu Pitts, and Patsy Kelly that came out a few months ago.
On his show, too? I don't know if I caught that one.
I don't know if the show is telecast yet.
Oh, okay.
Broadcast, podcasted.
Yeah. Well, I'm 2 months ahead right now, Don't tell anybody. Okay. This is supposed to be live. Anyway.
Okay, yeah, it's live as we speak.
But
wasn't that impeachment amazing?
Yes, it was. Oh, that's right. We talked about how we defriended each other. Oh, that's right.
Yeah, there we go.
Too many in-jokes here. Okay. All right. Let me get back to the basics and what I usually do. I mean, you probably have similar background to me, but how did you get interested in all these pop culture people and movie stars and things like that and into writing?
Well, it started actually with a terrible, tragic historical event, the assassination of President Kennedy. When that happened, I was just a little kindergarten kid, and my mom picked me up. We went half days in kindergarten. My mom picked me up from school, stopped at the grocery store, and they put the radio up against the PA system that was piping in the music, and the announcement was coming over the air, and all of a sudden, everything just sort of froze, and here I am, a little 5-year-old kid, seeing adults actually cry for the first time. Well, the following weekend, there was nothing on TV except coverage, so my parents took us, my brother and me, to see a movie. It was my first time seeing a movie at a theater, and it was Who's Minding the Store with Jerry Lewis, and it was so packed that we had to sit way up in the balcony of the theater, and the very first scene in that movie, Jerry Lewis is noisily slurping soup,
right.
And people are just rocking in their seats laughing at this guy, and my young 5-year-old mind is processing this as during a really sad time where everybody's unhappy, this goofy guy on the screen is making them all laugh. And at that precise moment, I fell in love with comedy and with movies, and pretty much from that point, I wanted to understand more about it, even though I was very, very little then.
Mm-hmm. So did you do kind of like what I used to do in the pre-internet days, is just like compile lists of filmographies and things like that?
This is, obviously this is during the 60s, and so very, very little was written. The nostalgia boom wasn't about to happen for a few years, so
right.
Very little was written in the 60s about these people. And so I had to kind of piecemeal stuff. You look at the weirdest places. There would be somebody would write into the TV mailbag section of the newspaper TV guide and ask you, whatever happened to Laurel and Hardy? Are they still around? Yeah. And of course, about a year after this incident, Laurel died. I saw his obituary and read it. Things like that along the way. But mostly I was more interested in the movies themselves. And back in those days, silent comedy was distributed to television like cartoons as children's entertainment. You had stuff like Comedy Capers and Laugh Tunes and stuff like that, Chuckleheads. And they would be little, the best title is The Funny Mans, M-A-N-N-S. And they would show silent comedy with these obtrusive sound effects and music, but that's how I clicked into the whole thing and started to learn about people like, Ben Turpin and Arbuckle and all of the comedians that were not real relevant to that particular culture in the 60s. And you just kind of go from there.
Now, when you started getting interested, you said you saw a Jerry Lewis movie, but did you just stick with Lewis for a while and then branch out, or were you just absorbing everything all at the same time?
Pretty much everything all at the same time. 30 years later, I wrote a book, co-wrote a book with Ted Okuda on the Jerry Lewis film, so I got to tell that story to Jerry Lewis while sitting in his living room, so that was kind of cool.
Right.
But it was because he was the catalyst. But then all the crazy slapsticky stuff that was on TV that was marketed to kids, I was responding to as well. The Three Stooges were on every day after school, and on Saturday mornings, Laurel and Hardy were on, along with all the silent comedy clips that I was telling you about. And then I hooked up with the movie The Golden Age of Comedy that showed clips from a lot of silence, and you saw all of those. And that's when I was like 11 or 12. So it was throughout my childhood, and I did all the usual go outside and play baseball things that any kid did back then. But when I was on my own and into my own thing, rather than collect stamps, I was checking out the old comedy movies on TV.
So, I guess TV was the best way. Or did you try to get, obviously the older stars were gone, like Buster Keaton and stuff like that. But, I mean, did you go out and make an effort to see, a new Jerry Lewis movie when it came out in the late 60s? Or were you just like, these are so awful, I don't want to even watch them?
No, as a matter of fact, I defend Jerry Lewis as if he were a family member when it comes to his films. But, no, I did go to the movies during the 60s. Of course, remember, I was a kid, so, your parents would take you, or else you get a couple of kids from the neighborhood, and you go and you get a ride to the show. But at the time, by the time I was, seeing these movies, Lewis had already done his best work. Who's Minding the Store was when I was a real little kid.
Right.
But by the time I was getting together and going to see movies with friends, it was stuff like Don't Raise the Bridge, Lower the River, which was not particularly good. But you saw all the older ones on TV, including the ones he did with Mark. Same with Bob Hope. Bob Hope wasn't doing his best stuff when I was growing up, but you caught him on TV, even though they were both alive.
Yeah. And I guess they did reissue a few to the theaters in the late 60s and stuff like that, which is something they rarely do now, is reissue a film. But
no, not in the day of video. But back then, that did happen a lot, where you would go out. I would get books at the library. I read all about Harold Lloyd, and it was years before I saw one of his movies because they were out of circulation. Stuff like that. Okay. And you mentioned Buster Keaton. Actually, he was alive when I first started to get into this when I was a little kid. I would see him in the old Beach movies when they came out, and then later caught up with his silent classics.
Yeah, you're like a decade older than me, I believe, and so my growing up was in the 70s, and so the Stooges were still around, but Bud Abbott was still around, and a few others, but a lot of the other people, Laurel and Hardy, were both gone, and Buster Keaton definitely gone, and Harold Lloyd, I didn't remember, even though he died in the 70s, it's like I don't remember hearing about him. That I was pretty young then, I was probably like 4, so, but
But during the 70s, there's this big nostalgia boom where old movies were cool, And so that's why on college campuses they had Marx Brothers and W.C. Fields and all this stuff, because the late 60s, early 70s college element embraced those as anarchist-type things and the rebellious comedy. And so there was a big nostalgia boom. Humphrey Bogart was huge on the college campuses then, too.
And I think W.C. Fields as well, right?
Yeah, W.C. Fields was huge at the college campuses. And so, as a result, that stuff was hot. So that stuff was on TV. Yeah. And you got to see everything by the early 70s.
Yeah. For my take, I don't know if you had a similar situation like this. I caught a lot of stuff on TV and like Three Stooges and stuff like that. I just watch them. And then I think it was early 70s, it was Mike Douglas show or some interview or something with Mo Howard, and my mom says, "Hey, Mo's on TV," and I went in and said, "Who's this old man?" It's like I didn't realize these films were made so far back, and it's like, back in the 30s, they just seem like, of course they're making even almost to the time he was interviewed, but the earlier good ones with Curly, it was like back in the 30s and 40s, and it's like, wow, so. Yeah,
I've talked to other people like that reacted, but when I was a kid, I guess I kind of realized they were old movies. I would be like asking my grandparents. My grandparents were born at the turn of the century, so naturally they grew up watching these movies new, and so I would ask them about people like Ben Turpin and so forth that I just, wasn't going to get any information anywhere else, really.
Yeah.
And they would share their memories as best that they could, because they went to the movies and enjoyed them, but they were just the comedians they had. They weren't like into it like I was. And so, and I learned to read Roman numerals so I could read the copyright dates on TV, so I knew when these movies were made.
Right.
So I had an idea of that.
Yeah.
Plus, the Three Stooges host once indicated that Curly and Shemp had died. So I knew that they were both gone, and I was seeing movies that they had made.
Yeah.
Obviously, before that happened.
Right.
So.
Well, for me, it's like seeing him older. Actually, that kind of spurred my interest in seeing in the historical aspect of it. I go, wow, these have a tenure or whatever. It's not just something they did for a laugh a week ago and they're done. It's like they had longevity to it all, and that's where I got interested in. But I didn't know where to start on things, so I just compiled lists and stuff like that, because there's very few books, as you well know. So.
Well, in the early 70s, the guy that was there were some books like William K. Everson did a book on Laurel and Hardy that was great and so forth. But the guy that I always consider the pioneer, I hope he's not listening and getting embarrassed by the accolade, but Leonard Maltin, when he came out with the great movie shorts and movie comedy teams and stuff like that, that was the first time. I mean, he had a filmography of the Three Stooges, so all those movies, which I had seen countless times by that time, I could actually kind of put in order and see the trajectory and the evolution. It's like I grew up with the Beatles, so I heard the Beatles as they happened, and I can appreciate how they evolved. I didn't hear Sgt. Pepper and then Love Me Do all over the place.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do that with something like the Three Stooges, so I had to kind of figure it out in my head because of my deeper interest in what order these went and what was the first Shemp, what was the last Shemp,
right.
what was the last Curly, how come? Mm-hmm. And all that was like, he gathered the information first and put all that out there, and my God, that was helpful.
Yes. Now, I met him a few years ago. He's a very sweet man, and I told him as well, the three historians that I idolized, and now they're all, well, Malton's not really a friend, but he's an acquaintance, I'll leave it at that. But the other two are Jerry Beck and Jim Korkis, and it's like before I got into all this, I was a teenager, and I saw like Malton's book that Jerry Beck contributed, of Mice and Magic on animation. I said, I was like in heaven. This is like the book, and it's like, So I've met all these guys, and I said I idolized you. I have to admit, and then they were flattered, so and still are, but it's like. I
haven't met any of them, but I have admired the work of all three for quite a long time.
Yes, yes. So, which book did you do first, then? Is it you had an earlier version of the Jerry Lewis book. Was that the first one, or is there something before that?
No, that's the same book. It was in hardcover for like 20 years, and then they put it out in paperback.
Oh, okay. I have the paperback version. Okay, I got it.
Yeah,
okay.
But No, my first two books suck.
Oh. Let's talk about them.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, let's talk about what sucks, so that nobody buys anything ever. People come on Amazon. It's hilarious. I once had somebody come on Amazon and give my book a bad star rating because they didn't like the quality of paper used.
Oh. I've had wacky reviews too, and I'm like, I wish I could erase these reviews. They're just nonsense,
Nah, you let them stand. They're more fun. But yeah, so if I'm going to be judged by the quality of the paper by anybody, I give up. Okay, you win. But my first two books, the first, I get a contract for a book, and my first book was like this overview of movie comedians, and it's out of print now. So the problem is you can find it like for $1. So people say, "Oh, one of Neibaur's books for only $1." Then they buy it and they say, "This sucks." It's like really hollow and opinionated, where I tell what I like and what I don't like, and then list a title-only filmography, and that was good enough back then, I suppose. But when I look at it now, it's like I give no reasons. I don't give any substance. And plus, my tastes have changed a little bit on some things that I probably could have done better. But, I can be dismissive and say, that's my first book. It's out of print, and who cares? Right. Then I did one. I wanted to do one on, the Hollywood tough guys like Cagney and Bogart and Edward G. Robinson and so forth. Yeah. And first of all, the title is awful. The publisher changed it to Tough Guy, the American Movie Macho. And this time, I tried to explain too much, and I'm using words like James Cagney's performance in this film is a study in asceticism. And now I look back and I say, if I was my college professor, I'd flunk me. Those two books I'm dismissive of and I make fun of, and they were written over 30 years ago, and that's just the way it is. But then after that,
what's your first good book? All right.
my first good book was this morning. No, my third book was a reference book on RKO Studios, listing all their features with credits and stuff, which is now rendered obsolete by the internet. Right. But then I did the Jerry Lewis book, and since then I've done books on everybody from Chaplin and Buster Keaton to Jerry Lewis and Elvis Presley to Clint Eastwood and Jack Nicholson. None of them are biographies. They're all film-by-film looks at the performer or director's work.
Okay, well, let's talk about a few of them here. I'll stick with the Jerry Lewis one since in that one I actually own, so I can comment on it. You said you met him. Now, did you actually interview him? I saw little sound bites about certain films from him, but I didn't know if they're from interviews you did or got from other information or other sources.
Yeah, nope, those are exclusive. Ted and I contacted his people and said, because we said to ourselves, we can't do this when we write about Buster Keaton, but Lewis is alive and well, and let's give it a shot. All they can do is say no. So we contacted his people, and they said, yeah, he'll do it. Oh, okay. And I guess they got a hold of, Lewis probably got a hold of my first book and said no, but he probably got a hold of Ted, and Ed Watts did a book on the Columbia Comedy Shorts, which is very good. Maybe you looked at that, and that got us in. Okay. But anyway, we set it all up, and after he finishes with the telethon, he likes to hang out on his boat in the San Diego harbor. And so we made arrangements to go hang out with him on his boat. And so we sat on Jerry Lewis's boat and asked him every question we could. And at first, he had a guy all set up to come in after like a half hour and say, "Come on, Jerry, we've got that thing." Because he didn't know us, and he was going to give us like a little bit of time. So we're asking, and we understood how that works. So we're asking as many questions as we could. And then when the guy came in and says, "Come on, Jerry, we have that thing," Jerry waved him off and hung around with us for like 2 or 3 more hours. Oh, wow. Okay. Answered all these questions, and then he really did have to go, but he made an appointment right then and there for us to come to his home in a few weeks and finish out any interviews, refining the interviews and getting more quotes. So we got to do stuff like, "So, Jerry, what'd you think of the Three Stooges?" and stuff like that while we were there. Because we got to hear stories about, like, him and Elvis Presley on the Paramount lot and stuff like that, which I later used for my Elvis book years later.
Okay, I was going to ask that. Yeah, as you mentioned.
So it all worked out well that way. But the first thing when you walk into his house, the first thing we saw was the original painting by Norman Rockwell from Cinderfella, hung up in his living room. And we walk in, we go, "Hey, look!" So.
Let's take it. No, just kidding.
We didn't steal anything from Jerry. No.
Okay. How was he? I mean, some people say he's an awful person or was an awful person, and other people said, no, I never had any bad times with him. Was he, at least cordial during that time and answered everything?
Yeah, well, they say both of those about me, but Jerry, he was super nice to us, but he didn't remember things correctly all the time. That's why. Well, what did he say on that Laurel and Hardy DVD that Laurel saw a fat electrician and said, "Hey, I can make money with him," and that was Hardy.
Right.
Hardy had been in movies for like 5 years by that time.
Yes.
He had the thing all mixed up.
Yes.
Well, he does that with his own films. When we said, "Well, now you made this movie in this year," and he goes, "No, that was that year." And I said, "When you did this scene with so and so in this movie, no, he wasn't in that movie." And we'd have to prove it. And he'd go, "Oh, geez, what do I know? I only directed it," and kind of laugh it off. Mm-hmm. But you have to realize, he's an old man, and A, he tells stories, and B, he doesn't remember stuff because he didn't study it. He just did it 50 years before. So we gave him a pass on that, and we just made sure that we knew our stuff so that when he got lost, we brought him back on track. Or we printed, rather than print the legend, we printed the truth. And but he was very nice, very helpful, very friendly. He was taking us around his house and showed leather-bound scripts for his movies, including the Bellboy one with Stan Laurel's written instructions on the margins.
Oh, wow.
I get to actually see that. And we're freaking out seeing this stuff. It's really cool stuff. So, no, he was great. And after that, he stayed friends. That's something that I didn't expect, where he'd call and ask how I was, years later. He was still doing that. He would call on my birthday. I'd call on his. Things like that started happening, which I didn't expect. When we did the Stan Laurel, Ted and I teamed up to do a book on the Stan Laurel solo films, and we asked Jerry to write the foreword.
Yes.
Not only did he agree, but he didn't write anything down. He filmed himself, and they sent it to us on a thumb drive so we could, and we just transcribed from there. And he told the story about this is how Laurel and Hardy met, which is completely wrong, and we just didn't use that because it's completely wrong. It's funny to hear him tell that story, but it's not right.
Yeah. Well, at least you left it out, or you could just put an asterisk. Not right now. Just kidding.
This is BS. This right here.
But. Well, that's great because, you always hear all these horrible things about Jerry and stuff like that. Now, had you seen all of Jerry Lewis's films at the time, or the others, like even now, some aren't on DVD, so was there some elusive ones that you just had to kind of make up what it was?
Not really, no. Most of them we saw as we were growing up and, had a pretty good idea of. But I remember he was doing something nearby where I lived, some special presentation thing, anniversary thing, nearby where I lived, and he let me know and then Ted came in, and me and him and my son and everybody, we all went and took Jerry Lewis out to lunch in Milwaukee, and I said to him, I says, the only one of your movies I don't have on tape, at that time it was tape, is the Big Mouth. I can't seem to find that one. Well, I could find it. It's just like it cost like $80 or something.
Yeah.
It was just crazy. And he goes, "Oh, really? Okay. Well, let me see what I can do about that." Maybe a week later, there was one in the mailbox from me with his autograph on it.
Wow.
So he did stuff like that all the time. He was constantly doing stuff like that. So. It was nice, he got to meet my son. I mean, he arranged, because we were going to just drive him over to the restaurant. We went to the hotel to get him, and he had a limo waiting. He says, "No, we'll take my car." And I'm thinking, you don't know your way around town. I really should drive. And he goes, no, I have a car. And there was a limo sitting there waiting, and there's people, and he's trying to watch golf in the back of the limo, and my son keeps changing the station to wrestling. And then he'd grab my son and choke him and stuff. And my son was like, 6 years old or something at the time, so it was kind of funny.
Now, the ones that surprised me, and I guess I had heard of them at the time, but they certainly didn't get wide release, at least not around here. The French ones he did in the 80s, the late 80s and stuff like that. So did you see those? Or?
Yeah, those are awful, but we saw them both. Yeah, we saw them both in the French language, and basically Lewis admits they're bad movies, but he just showed up and, he got a trip to France, a lot of money to make some faces in some other people's movie, and there's like topless women and stuff like that. So it's pretty wild experience. But yeah, we did manage to obtain copies of those.
Okay, because I was saying, where in the world did you and then I look on IMDb and I go, hey, they do exist. I didn't even know about them. I thought Slapstick of Another Kind or whatever was his last film, or he did Mixed Nuts or something later, but I don't know. So I was kind of curious what his last film was, and then these French ones are in there, and what?
Yeah, I know, exactly.
But so after Jerry Lewis, you know the order of your own books probably. So which ones did you work on next?
After Jerry Lewis is my horror story book, the Bob Hope films.
Yeah.
I actually got quotes from Hope and everything, but I was almost done with the book. This is my great horror story. And my computer crashed, and the disc that I was saving the book on didn't work, so I had to rewrite the book. And the book suffers from that because the notes I had and everything were on the disc. This was floppy disk time, so these things don't happen as easily as they did back then.
Right.
So this is my catastrophe book, where I rewrote the book as best as I could, but I lost my notes. I lost everything because it was all saved on disc, and the discs for some reason didn't work in the new computer that I had to buy when my current one crashed. So every precaution I took failed. So, and as a result, it's not a very good book, and I have to admit it isn't. And I suppose that's not nice to say. Now no one's ever going to buy it ever, but it's not. It's not one of my better books. I have some cool pictures in there, some cool quotes from Hope and stuff like that. But overall, my assessments, I could have done better with it or more with it, but I lost it. I was almost finished. It's this terrible experience. So there's not a whole lot I can do about that one.
I was thinking about things.
Yeah, but then I've written 2 books on Chaplin. I've written 3 on Buster Keaton. In fact, one Buster Keaton book I co-wrote with Terry Lynch, a young lady who is one of my. I have an amazing staff of around 2 or 3, but that has helped on my projects. And Terry and I did a book on Buster Keaton's silent short films, and that's probably the book I'm most proud of because I really think we nailed it there. I think we really gave a lot of information on each short, not only assessing them, but also providing background information and stuff, and some good pictures and so forth. And I'm really proud of what we did with that one. That's probably the book I have the most pride in.
Yeah, I have that book too. And it's kind of funny. I hesitated. I saw it in the store, and I hesitated buying it because I was saying, this doesn't really cover everything. And, I was kind of like, and then when I started looking through it, I go, I get what you did. So, then I understood it because I was looking for a Buster Keaton, whole career. I wanted the Beach Party movies in there. In other words, I wanted everything in there, and it's it's only these. Those are probably the best films he did, but it's I wanted everything. But I get what you did and the reasons.
It's because if I do his whole career, the book would be 900 pages and cost $1 million.
Right.
It's just I don't want to just do a few paragraphs. I had to do that for Bob Hope. But the Buster Keaton stuff, I also have a book called The Fall of Buster Keaton, which is on his sound films, and there I cover such classics as Pajama Party and How to Stuff a Wild
Well, that book I don't have, so I'll probably have to invest in that, and I probably will still get the Bob Hope one because I interviewed Wesley Hyatt on another episode here, and he did Bob Hope on TV, and it just made me think, is there a book about the Bob Hope films, even those the latter half are pretty bad. And then I saw that you did one. I was like, oh, cool. It's so.
Nah,
Well, is there a way to? Okay, I don't want to belabor it, but is there ever a chance you'd like revise it or update it, or is it just?
I wish I could. That's the one book I wish I could go back and rewrite, but the book's done and it's out, and it's like if somebody makes a bad movie, I suppose they can remake the same movie and say, "Oh, this is the good one," but I'm afraid I pretty much jumped the boat on that one.
Okay,
man.
Yeah, because when I did my Harvey Comics history called the Harvey Comics Companion, I was just going to expand upon something I wrote originally, and then I realized it's not going to work. And so I literally had to start from scratch and just start over, and it made a better book. So that's why I know it'd be a bunch of time and investment, and you go, oh, I got to watch all these Bob Hope films again. But I don't know. Anyway, I may still.
We're good until about 1959.
I'm going to give you bucks for it. I probably will buy it. So anyway, because.
Well, if I had an extra one, I'd just send you one.
Oh, okay.
I only have my own copy, and I'm almost willing to give you that. But, so.
You really don't like it. Okay, I want it even more.
It's just
and the movie comedians. I want that one too.
I wish it. I wish it hadn't happened where I had to, respond to a catastrophe. But I did books on Keaton and a couple on Chaplin. I did Charley Chase talkies, the Harry Langdon silence. So I cover a lot of things that I'm pretty satisfied with how they turned out.
Okay, let's talk about the Chaplin ones. I mean, because there's a lot of Chaplin books out there. I don't have yours. I've kind of been a latent Chaplin fan. I actually was of the mind of just not being able to stand him, to where I could tolerate him, to where now I'm like, I don't know why this has changed, but you said you had rediscovery yourself about certain comedians, and now I totally respect them, and I'm totally wanting, and I think it was the Criterion releases that kind of switched my mind about Chaplin, that he wasn't like a hack, it's like that's actually, some people would say that's sacrilege, Chaplin's the greatest, but I don't know, I found him annoying and everything, so
my approach to Chaplin is somewhat different to a lot of others. Most people, when they embrace Chaplin, first of all, I think he's the single most important figure in the history of motion pictures, so let's get the hyperbole out of the way. And then I also I think his coolest stuff isn't like City Lights and Modern Times and so forth. I think his best stuff is the really early stuff, and like his Keystone. I did a book on his Keystone films, and a lot of Chaplin fans dismiss those as like the Beatles at Hamburg type of thing, where it's just like sort of a lead up to greatness. Whereas I think this is before Chaplin added any pretension or any any of that extra stuff, and he was just this wild, knockabout, crazy, gag-filled, creative genius, making incredibly funny, outrageous comedies, and he had a real vision, and I think something like his Trysting Place is just hilarious, or Dough and Dynamite.
Well, those are the ones I like, too, and so I think I'm kind of the same thought, and this is why I didn't like Chaplin, is like he started off with that type of humor, and then later, all I can think of is stuff that is painful to kind of go through sometimes, is Monsieur Vidot or Countess in Hong Kong or something. It's like
a comedy glorifying murder for money. A great
So I mean that type of stuff. It's like I go, what happened to the funny? And even stuff which now I'm kind of have a second thought about, because unlike, say, and we'll say Jerry Lewis too in this, Jerry Lewis and Charlie Chaplin, they loved the pathos, and for me it's like, I just like the funny. Get rid of those pathos. Who cares? We don't care if your clown has another side to him with sadness. We just want the funny. But I'm learning it now, that I'm respecting it now and understand it better. So
well, they do that today too. Nowadays they'll have a comedy, then this big, huge, dramatic moment in the middle of it. And, if the Three Stooges made movies today, Moe would be weeping in anger management classes. So it just isn't the same. But with Chaplin, I like what he did at SNA and at Mutual too.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't write a book on Mutual. Michael,
okay.
there's an geez, I can't think of his name now. And he's like a friend of mine. He wrote this great book on the Chaplin.
Well, he's not listening. Malton might be, but he's not. No, just kidding.
Okay, well, yeah, no, it wasn't Leonard Maltin. Michael. I can't think of his last name. I hate that when that happens. But I'm sorry, Michael. But it's a great book too. I'd like to plug it. But,
Nesmith. I don't know. No, just kidding.
yeah, his name I'd remember. But,
Go ahead. Sorry.
Anyway, the Keystones, and then at SNA he started to transition, and then at Mutual is where I think he perfected his craft. Mm-hmm. And then he kept it good, but like you said, he added a little bit more pathos, a little bit more drama, and a lot of people applaud that. And while I respect it objectively, subjectively, I prefer the crazy knockabout short films he did.
Okay. So we're kind of on the same level on that, but I have to respect, because I just dismissed the later stuff totally, and now I kind of respect that. I've also done more research. I've read Chaplin's autobiography and other books about him and stuff like that, so I get a more well-rounded picture than just kind of like, and again, like Jerry Lewis, kind of like this jerky guy, it's like, to put it politely, so, but, now, we mentioned Three Stooges a few times. Are there any intentions of doing a Three Stooges book by you, or are there just too many out there?
I would, but it would be a blast. It would be a lot of fun to do. But I think they've pretty much been well covered, where I don't know that I have anything that can be added, because there's some incredibly wonderful, brilliant, ingenious Three Stooges uber geeks out there that just know everything, and it's online, and there's books, and there's any piece of information you want to find out about anything regarding their films is sort of out there. Mm-hmm. And as much as I'd like to tell how much I love this or that, I just don't think there's room for me.
You could do the Curly Joe Dorita biography. No, just kidding.
Yeah, well, no, I don't do biographies, but doing Curly Joe Dorita's films, I saw a lot of those first run at the theater. Yeah.
So, anyway.
You get arguments with kids who insisted that was the Curly that was in the shorts on TV. Honest to God, kids thought, and they would refer to Curly Howard as Curly Joe, thinking it's the same guy.
I wasn't that dumb, but,
it was maddening. It was maddening.
Let's see. Well, when you're on Phil Hall's show, I'll go to the Andy Clyde one. That was an interesting thing. I had only really seen some of those shorts. I think you mentioned it, in that big Three Stooges box set. They had like a bonus disc that just had a bunch of extra stuff, And I had heard of Andy Clyde, but I really hadn't seen it. And it's like, now that I've seen some of them, I was kind of in agreement with what you were saying on there. The Jules White ones are really good, and I'd like to see more. Is there? I think you touched on this. Is that there's just ones that just don't exist, or is they sitting there in the Columbia Vault or something, or what?
Well, on the disc that came with the Three Stooges set, it's stuff that the Three Stooges did solo, and Shemp was in a handful of Andy Clyde comedies. That's why those are on there. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the very first one in which Shemp co-stars with Andy Clyde is a lost film. It's not in the Sony archives, and it's not in like the Library of Congress. I looked into all that. There is if there's a print existing out there anywhere, nobody seems to know about it, and that's one that obviously Columbia would have, Sony would have included that on that disc if it existed at all, and it just doesn't. And I'd love to see it. So you get a whole of like reviews and production information, and sometimes a script and stuff like that for the elusive ones, so you can write about them and tell why they're elusive and what actually happened and how they were received at their time. But they weren't ones that I personally could screen. And with Andy Clyde, he had the longest running and series of short subjects at Columbia, other than the Three Stooges. Right. And the fact that he started in the silent era and worked for Mac Sennett and stuff like that, then worked into TV. He was a regular on Lassie and shows like that. That's just incredible.
Real McCoys, I think, is what we was also.
Real McCoys, and a lot of Westerns, the Hopalong Cassidy films, and some with Whip Wilson, people like that. It was a blast.
It's just kind of funny that, it's like, that. Well, first of all, it's always funny when a sound movie is missing. I can understand silence because when sound took over, they just kind of dumped everything. And a lot of that stuff was on nitrate film or whatever, and and vaults that got burned to the ground and stuff like that, whatever. But so there's no leads, not like on that particular one. Just to belabor the point, it's like there's not even part of the film, like some TV print or something that exists somewhere? Or
no, it was never in the TV package as far as I know.
Okay.
And there's a few Andy Clyde movies. There's actually, a handful of them that just are not out there. And I talked to, people that work in the archives at Sony. When you say to them, hey, putting out an Andy Clyde sampler, even if it's an on-demand DVD, like DVD-R or whatever, would be great. And they'd agree with me. But then when you contact the people in charge of doing video, you don't hear back from them. It's like like a sort of a non-existent thing. And I know there's a niche market out there because I'm part of it and I know the situation, but they don't realize that. And I'm afraid it's hard to convince them that beyond the Three Stooges, there were people there that got them to put out the Charley Chase Columbias and the Buster Keaton Columbias, but the people that managed to do that don't seem to be active at the place anymore, and those who remain behind, an old movie to them is probably the first Star Wars, so it's kind of hard to do.
Yeah, it seems to be the case in all the studios, except maybe Warner's, because Warner Archives tries. There's still a lot of things that they don't put out, but they put out quite a bit, which is actually quite remarkable considering, So. And of those, just since we're mentioning that, have you ever had any pull in getting a movie released, either through them or through Sony or anything like that?
Oh no, I'm not nearly that interesting.
So they didn't look at the Andy Clyde book and start scratching their chin, going, maybe, I don't know.
No, they probably got a hold of movie comedians and dismissed me completely. So.
No, it is true, I think, on Columbia Pictures, didn't they, regardless if they release it, didn't they actually go through their entire archives and, remaster it or something like that, or upgrade it or something? I think I heard that a few years ago.
That's probably true. I'm not exactly positive, but it's probably accurate, yeah.
Yeah, and I think they even went so far as actually, restoring old movie trailers and any short they could find and newsreel. I don't know what Columbia's newsreels were called, but it seemed like I heard that they did everything just because, and I guess, they could release it all, but it doesn't seem like there's any intention really to release it, right?
So, yeah, that's unfortunate.
Okay. Let's see. Now, just out of curiosity, so you have a film book of W.C. Fields, which I do not have.
Yeah.
But back in the 70s, and I have this one, there's a book called The Films of W.C. Fields. So,
yep, Donald Deschner.
So, was that your intention to do, an updated version of these books? Because they used to have the films of fill in the blank for years, and then now those are all out of print, and sometimes you can find them cheap in old used bookstores, and sometimes they're hard to find. So, was that your intention, or you just love the W.C. Fields and all these other comedians so much that you said, I'm doing my book regardless if there's another book or not?
Well, the only books written about W.C. Fields in that manner were written in the 60s, and they're out of print. Yeah. So, and a lot of films, they had access to none of the silence. In fact, even as talking you're telling me was not in circulation when those books were written. So I had more to say and more information and so forth. In fact, my book's even the first one to indicate that the golf specialist is not his first appearance in a sound film. He was in a newsreel in which he spoke before the golf specialist, and that's I believe my book might be the first one to say that. Now somebody else is going to have a book that before mine is going to yell at me, but I think so. Yeah. And I got that information from the recently late Ron Hutchinson, who was helpful on a lot of my projects, and we're all going to really miss Ron. But yeah, the W.C. Field films. See, I can't do the Three Stooges, Laurel and Hardy. Those are pretty well covered with pretty recent books.
Okay.
I mean, Randy Scratford did a great book on Laurel and Hardy. Scott McGillivray did one on their later years. Those books are very readily available and fairly recent. But when a book hasn't been in print since like 1970 or whatever,
right?
And they're mostly the Citadel books that you were talking about, the films of books. Those are mostly picture books with a few paragraphs about what happened in the movie.
Right.
They don't go into any real depth, and there's a lot more information that can be acquired now. So I think we can do more than those real old books. Just like the book I have on Jean Harlow. There was a book on the films of Jean Harlow that came out around 1969 or so, and nothing since. Well, there's more to say because that's essentially a picture book, and not a real lot of depth to the films themselves, and what her legacy is all about. And so, and it's long out of print. It was, it's been out of print for, almost 50 years now. So I think we can say a little bit more about that.
True, yeah. Because that was the next one I was going to invest in, is the W.C. Fields one. Seriously, more than Bob Hope, but because I didn't know you did the Bob Hope one. But yeah, it is true. A lot of the film books that came out in the past were like the Richard Noble frame blow-up ones, like Why a Duck and all those series, and they did Godfrey Daniels and stuff like that. So not any history. And of course now those are all kind of rendered obsolete because of the access to the films itself, and you can freeze frame on your TV and pour over the video in pristine quality. So
Nobly did Marx Brothers Scrapbook.
Nobly? Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and he did Marx Brothers Scrapbook, and that's a great book.
Yes.
Groucho just kind of let loose, and Nobly printed everything. Yeah. And then Groucho says, "Wait a minute," and tried to sue him. There's a great story behind it, but there's a lot of good information in that book, and so I always liked it. I think the author is still around.
Well, he did a lot of photo novels during the 70s and 80s. It's like I have some of the Star Trek ones and things like that. So he was continuing on for a long time, and I guess he just got burned out, or the home video market kind of rendered him obsolete, so he just stopped. I don't know. So
yeah.
But one of the books also I saw on your list, Monster Movies of Universal Studios. Do you go into like the filmographies of like Boris Karloff or anything like that, or you just strictly stick to the Universal movies?
Yeah, it's just the Universal monster movies. It isn't like, stuff like Old Dark House isn't in there, but the Frankensteins, the Draculas, all of those, and I did a lot of real heavy research. A couple of helpers. Katie Carter was one of my helpers on that, and Kelly Parmalee, two ladies that helped me on that book with the research and the prose and stuff that were looking into it. And I found some wild stuff, like an interview with Lon Chaney where he talks about how he and Maria Ouspenskaya almost got killed on the set of Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman and stuff like that. So I not only do an assessment of the films and give them a lot of respect because I think they're all great, but I also have some background information as I can find. And there was a book where I thought there was already enough written about those films because there's so many books like that out there. But that's a situation where the publisher suggested I do that because I think they wanted a book on those films. For that only happened twice in my career. That one and Jack Nicholson were not originally my ideas. But then I started talking to friends and others that about doing a book like that, and they were like really all for it. I figured, okay, well, if there's a market for a new book covering the Universal monsters, so I limited it to just the monster movies because then I could talk at a little bit greater length. Still, it's not a real long book because there aren't that many, when you total them all up. But you still have enough room to say what you want about everything. And, there's a few really neat pictures in there and so forth. So I'm pretty satisfied because that's probably my best-selling book of all time.
How far late do you go? You go through the...
I go through the creature movies.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. I didn't know if you went to the 60s or 70s or something like that with things like that, because I know it's kind of different after that. It's not really the studio system and everything, but yeah.
No, it's just the Universal monster movies. I did include the Abbott and Costellos, though.
Yeah. Well, that's cool.
Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man and stuff like that.
Right.
Are all in there.
I'll have to get that one too. It's like I keep this is my Christmas list here. Look down here. Okay, I need this one. I need this one.
Well, this sounds great because my last royalty check was 2 clean shirts and a taffy apple.
All right.
So.
Now, on ones like you just mentioned the Jack Nicholson one, which is kind of written on demand. Was that harder for you? I don't know if you were a fan of his. I mean, I'm a fan of his, but I don't know if I'd write a book on him. But was that difficult for you?
The only thing that was interesting is that's the first book I wrote where I hadn't already seen all of the movies pretty much. Mm-hmm. Now, with Andy Clyde, of course, I hadn't seen every little short subject he made. But for something like, if I choose to write a book on the Clint Eastwood Westerns, or I choose to write a book on the Charley Chase talkies or the Harry Langdon Silence, I've pretty much seen them all and have an idea of how I want to approach it. Whereas Jack Nicholson, as big as his movies were, I really hadn't seen every single one that, so the publisher didn't want a career overview. I did. I wanted to do all of his films up to his latest. And they said, no, just write the essential Jack Nicholson and just the highlights, good and bad, of what he did. And so I went about it that way and just mentioned his others. That book turned out pretty well regardless, but it's more fun to write something you have a passion for.
Right. At
the very least, the Universal Monsters book, I love those. I have a passion for those, and so I was really into that when they suggested, we'd like a book on this. Would you be interested? I'm like, yeah, good idea, but hasn't enough been written? And they say we think we can do something with it, and so I talked to friends and we put something together, and it was great. Mm-hmm. But with Jack Nicholson, even though there haven't been books with the same sort of depth that we try to provide with the book that I did. It's when you admire the person, but you don't have the unbridled passion for the work, it's not as much fun or exciting of a project, right. Or even as challenging.
Yeah.
So, but it didn't. It's not like a blow off. It came off. It's not like but it came out just fine.
It's no Bob Hope, huh? Okay.
Yeah, well, Bob Hope was a catastrophe because my computer.
I know. I just keep bringing. Now that I know that, I keep bringing it up. It's like.
Yeah, and that's why I love telling that story to other writers because. Now it's going to happen to you some days.
Well, it hasn't happened for an entire book, but it has happened for articles I've written. I've had to rewrite articles. Now with the cloud, it's a little bit harder to do. It's like you can back things up and.
Yeah, it's really easy to keep things now, but back then it was a catastrophe. I had my punishment in hell, the third ring of hell.
Yeah, so I kind of know what you're talking about, but it's like I remember in those days where you had to remember save it, and I would save things like in 5 different spots just to make sure, and I did lose drafts before in those old days, so I'd have to like go to the previous draft and just kind of figure it out what I updated and stuff like that. So yeah, I kind of know what you're talking about, but I've never lost a complete book like that.
Oh God, I was almost done all my notes, and I had saved it, backed it up on a floppy disk. The floppy disks didn't work when I got the new computer. I went to other places and tried to get it to work. Oh, that was murder.
Yeah.
This is like 25 years ago.
Right. So. Nowadays, you could actually extract information from disk drives a lot easier, but that was then. This is now too. It's like
exactly.
One other one here, it's like you mentioned it earlier, is the Elvis movies. I mean, You actually sat through all those. No, just kidding.
Exactly. Yeah. It says the guy who wrote about the monkeys.
I know. And yes, I sat through all the Monkees episodes, and I've seen virtually all the Elvis films. So I'm just kind of joking with you on that.
I know. When I saw the Monkees in 1969. In concert, just after Peter left the group, and then I saw him reform in the '80s in concert when Mike wasn't touring with them. I never saw all four at once. I've seen all four, but three at a time, and now it's too late with Davey.
Yeah, I did that too. I saw the one that was predominant during the '80s and '90s a couple times. So it was the Mickey, Davey, Peter version. And then Davey passed away, and I saw him 2 weeks in person at an autograph show 2 weeks before he passed away. And then I figured, well, that's it. They're done, And then later in that same year, Mike decided to pop up, and so I saw the other three, Mike, Peter, and Mickey. And I go, okay, so...
Yeah.
But
I saw Davey, Mike, Mickey in '69, and then I saw Davey, Peter, Mickey in probably '86 or '87, and never saw all four at once.
Yeah.
But anyway, the Elvis movies. I wrote that book to defend them because, first of all, Elvis was a decent actor. He had innate talent. It just never got,
right.
They never fostered anything with it because when a dramatic movie like Wild in the Country is the only Elvis movie to lose money, and a lightweight musical like Blue Hawaii is his biggest moneymaker, the producers and the management, Curl Parker, are going to go where the money is, and Elvis just followed along. I mean, so he would have loved to have made more movies like King Creole and Flaming Star and Jailhouse Rock, the more dramatic ones, but they wanted fun in Acapulco. And what's amazing is that when you look up, I mean, even the weaker Elvis movies like Clam Bake, when you look up what they did in the theaters. I mean, and this was during a time when the Beatles and the Stones and Motown and everything was killing on the charts, and Elvis hadn't had a hit since Crying in the Chapel. And but his movies are like huge box office blasts, and you see movie distributor or exhibitors writing to the trade magazine saying, "Boy, oh boy, that Elvis saved the day for us. We really made money on Clam Bake, and it's one of his best, and the kids loved it." And I'm like, "Oh, come on." I went to that movie. Nobody loved it, but that's what was going on. And I remember going to see Speedway at the theater, and there were people like dancing in the aisles and stuff during the songs. It was just a nut house, and I'm like, this is great. And so it's hard to look back at those movies and say that they're all bad. They're not great cinema by any stretch of the imagination, but it's hard to call them bad because they were so much fun. And I realized that even his most nonsensical lightweight musicals, I always felt a little better after watching one. There was something. I mean, they're colorful and have the pop music and pretty girls. I mean, what's not to like?
Yeah.
So I was digging them, and I thought, I'm going to do a book on the Elvis movies, and that's the one where I think that's the one where somebody wrote into Amazon and said, I don't like the paper the book was printed on. Two stars. Yeah, I think I got one that said, "How come all the photos are in black and white too?" So I think they wanted a glossy picture book with color photos, which it wouldn't be much fun. So
there's plenty of those. So you could just look at a glossy book and read yours. Did any of Elvis's movies actually flop, like Change of Habit or Charro or those later ones like that?
No.
Wow.
That's what's amazing. Charro actually isn't that bad of a movie.
No, it's not. But I mean, I was thinking, those are like at the tail end before he did the concert films, and I thought, you figure he would walk through those because he already decided, nope, no more movies. I'm going back on tour. After the success of the '68 special, so the stuff he did later on, and Trouble with Girls wasn't bad, and Charro wasn't bad. And Change of Habit was, but and then he did those, and but they were still big hits, and people still he could have kept making movies and kept making a lot of money on them, but
I mean, I had a girlfriend over to watch Kissin' Cousins with me, and because I was trying to break up with her. No, but yeah, and she's laughing through the whole thing, and she's, yeah, this is one of his best ones, isn't it? And I says, no, this is a terrible one. but she's laughing through the whole thing, and I'm thinking, maybe people aren't approaching these like I do, as films, and they're approaching them as silly Elvis movies, and if I get a few laughs, okay.
Yeah.
And that's all they expected. It cost 50 cents to see a movie back then. So I put it all together and decided that, you know what, the Elvis movies, and people love to dismiss them. There was a documentary on HBO on Elvis, like a 3-part thing, and I was interviewed for it.
Mm-hmm.
And because I spoke positively about the Elvis movies, they didn't use 1 second of anything. Because the whole thing about his movies was like everybody saying, yeah, these suck. Boy, what a waste of time. Da, 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 da. And having me in there saying, hey, I always feel better after watching one. It's like, yeah, get this guy out of here. So, so there goes my HBO debut. But yeah, so I actually like the Elvis movies for what they are. I'm not going to put them in the same class as Hitchcock or Wells or Ford, but for what they are, they're fun.
Yeah. And there are some really good ones. I mean, if somebody really wanted to dissect it, you can get a King Creole or a Jailhouse Rock, and just probably at least there's a good 10 really good films that you could recommend. Probably, that are solid. I would think. Or
4.
Or 4. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But no, they're fun. Even something like I said, Girl Happy and stuff like that. Yeah. Fun in Acapulco. There's a certain lightweight fun to that. Yeah. And like I said, you feel better after watching one. Yeah. It's just, just relax.
Well, it has something to do, it's like you did Jerry Lewis films, and Hal Wallace was involved with both, Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis together mainly, but, it's like, so there was kind of a similarity of those. And just in cinema in general, it's like people diss Disney films from the past, but that's the way a lot of films were made back in the 50s and 60s. The problem with Disney, and I did my Disney book about the 70s, is they continued to make them that way long after everybody else had stopped. Bob Hope stopped, Jerry Lewis stopped, Elvis stopped, and Disney continued to make really lightweight, stupid films way into almost the 80s before they realized, maybe we should change our style. But
Super Dad.
Yes, exactly. So I could see Super Dad being an Elvis film if he made one in the 70s. Just have him in there water skiing and screaming. But
with Gail Gordon in the Bob Crane role.
There we go. And just all the usual cameos: Edward Andrews, Kathleen Freeman. It's like you can have everybody. In doing your Elvis book, I know about A Star Is Born, but were there any other movies after he stopped making them that he was considering doing?
The best one, the one I discovered in my research and I'm like, oh, come on. But I checked, and it's true.
Uh-huh.
Death Wish. I would have given anything for Elvis to have been in Death Wish instead of Charles Bronson. It was only like the early talks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Nothing ever came of it. But when I think of what Elvis looked like in 1974, I'm just picturing Elvis in a jumpsuit shooting punks. And and I love Charles Bronson. I like those movies, but the fact that Elvis was offered Death Wish, I'm like, somebody's a genius in the studio.
Wow.
Whoever came up with that, I'd like to buy him dinner.
Now, how did you find that one out? I mean, was it in interviews, or you found paperwork?
You look at there was a lot of people that would help. Nobody writes a book alone. There's always people out there that just are really geeked up on this stuff, and they'll provide you not only with the information, but nowadays they'll provide you with links to like articles in the trades, discussing some of that stuff. And it was just absolutely gobsmack fascinating to see something like that. So I love that. So, Death Wish was the one, but there was a few along the way where it goes all the way back to Thunder Road. Mitchum wanted Elvis to play the younger role in that. I forgot who was it. Was Was it Bellamy that did that? Earl Bellamy?
I don't remember.
I forgot who ended up doing the role, but he came to Elvis himself and said, come on, let's do this. He goes, well, I got to talk to my manager. Forget your manager. Come on, I'm asking you to do it. Let's go.
Yeah, I was going to say, who usually turned him down? Was it Elvis himself or the Colonel?
It was the Colonel. No, Elvis was always really open to stuff.
Okay.
He was cool about doing A Star Is Born, but Colonel was like, no, you're not the only star. You have to share the stardom. And for something like Thunder Road, it's like, no, that's Robert Mitchum's picture. You're not going to be the star. And Parker just was looking for the money. He used to say to the directors, we're not here. We don't know anything about making movies. That's your job. All we want is enough soundtrack songs for an album.
Oh, brother.
You can do whatever you want. Right. And that's how you ended up with movies that even I have to admit I couldn't sit through, like Harem Scarum.
I was going to say, what is your least favorite Elvis?
it would be, Harem Scarum is the one where I shall not watch that again. that's the one.
Isn't that another Elvis double? Isn't that another?
Even a complete mishmash, like Stay Away Joe, is cool because he's got Burgess Meredith in there, Joan Blondell and stuff. And there's just something cool about that. But Harem Scarum, that was murder. That was awful.
Isn't that another one of those ones where Elvis plays a double role? Is that correct, or am I thinking a different one? Because he does it
that's Kissing Cousins.
Okay, because I know he does it about 3 films. I think it's that, and it seems like there's another one that he plays twin and stuff like that. I can't remember.
I can't. It's been a while since I watched all the movies, but I honestly can't think of one where he plays more than one part except Kissing Cousins.
It seems like, well, maybe I'm wrong, but I haven't seen them all in years either. The one I have a fondness for that doesn't get talked about much, and I don't know what your review is, but I'll bring it up, is Roustabout. I actually like that one quite a bit.
Yeah, I like that one a lot too, and he liked the fact that Barbara Stanwyck was in it because he had a lot of respect for the old actors, and he tried to learn from her and ask her questions and stuff. And I think that's a decent, that's the only Elvis soundtrack album that was a #1 album, by the way.
I didn't know that. Blue Hawaii didn't go to #1?
I don't think so. I think Roustabout is the only #1.
Huh, interesting. But I know Elvis didn't have too many #1s. He wasn't like maybe in the 50s, but he wasn't like the Beatles. He always kind of, like I have this book, I forgot the author's name, but he's the big Elvis, sound, or, his whole discography connoisseur, and he always has his name on every reissue. But, he wrote some book about Elvis's recording sessions, and he just said, it's like Elvis never really topped the charts very much, later on, but, he sold enough to make RCA happy, so it's like,
once the Beatles pretty much hit, he wasn't even in the top 10 for several years, and then when the 68 special brought him back, and he did those Memphis sessions in '69, where he had stuff like In the Ghetto and all that. Those started bringing him back on the charts, and I like those sessions, but I didn't particularly like stuff like In the Ghetto and Don't Cry Daddy and stuff like that. That's I prefer like the Sun records and stuff like that. But you know how it is being a music guy.
Yeah. Did you talk about, like I've heard this before, is Elvis wanted to be on Laugh-In, even going so far as riding the tricycle in the raincoat, but Colonel said no. Did you talk about possible TV appearances or anything, or did you just stay strictly with the movies?
No, I stayed strictly with the movies, but it's true that Elvis was a big fan of Laugh-In. He liked comedy. He liked silly stuff. In fact, he did a movie over at Allied Artists. It was almost a semi-indie called Tickle Me, and when he found out the screenwriters were Edward Burns and Elwood Ullman, and that they had written for the Three Stooges and the Bowery Boys, he was all excited about, I'm going to do some good old-fashioned classic comedy. They had a haunted house thing full of haunted house gags in that movie and stuff that, you could have put in any Bowery Boys movie. And Elvis loved it, and that's the only movie for which Elvis actually got an acting award. It was like, some magazine type thing or something like that. I don't know exactly what it was.
Yeah.
There's Elvis, there's amazing, brilliant Elvis geeks out there that could just tell you that in a second. I wish I had them around.
Right.
Because they could help that out.
It is funny about Elvis. I mean, he did have a very good sense of humor. I know he loved Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
What else did he like? Well, the Pythons themselves.
Jerry Lewis, he said that Elvis was like one of the nicest guys he ever met, because he was a fan of Jerry Lewis, and he would come up and let him know stuff like that, and kind of joke around at Paramount with him and stuff. And he also had a lot of respect for Dean Martin, of course, being the singer. But he liked Jerry Lewis a lot. He liked a lot of comedy, and the sillier the better, it seemed, and I love that about him.
And when I did the research for my crack books, I found out Elvis read Mad and Cracked, but he preferred Cracked.
So did I.
Yeah, a lot of people I found out have, and I guess it's because it's sillier and not so, whatever. I don't know. Yeah, and I get it.
When I was a little kid and I was reading Mad, I liked all the Don Martin writing out sound effects and the Al Jaffe fold-ins and the lighter side with Dave Berg, but there was often a point to be made in a lot of the humor there. Yeah. Whereas Cracked just wanted to be funny.
Yes.
And so I always liked Cracked better, and then Sick too. Remember Sick? Yeah. That was out there. That was good stuff.
So let's see. Is there any other books that we haven't really covered that we should at least mention, or that's pretty much the ones I want to mention?
Yeah, well, I have written 25. The 25th one comes out in the spring. I don't know when this is going to run. So
it'll probably be coming out around the time this airs. So you can go ahead and plug it. Go ahead and plug it.
That works out. A book called The Gene Harlow Films, which I talked about earlier. And then right now, I'm working on a book on a director named William Bodine. He was a director who started in the silent era and worked into the television era, and he has an absolutely fascinating career because a lot of people are very dismissive because he spent most of his time doing low-budget stuff. But with a threadbare budget and like 6 days to make a feature film, he did some really cool creative stuff. And it's sort of like the Elvis movies. I'm writing a book to kind of defend William Bodine's work. And I'm going to start and we're going to cover all the silent shorts, the silent features, the early talkies. He went over to England and did some directing, came back here and went into low-budget films and stayed there through the 40s into the 50s. We're even going to talk about TV in that one. We're going to cover his whole career. It's going to be a career overview. I won't go film by film because he made like 700. But there'll be a chapter like the silent shorts, the silent features, England, and I'll talk about the highs and lows and the different films and so forth within each of those chapters, so we get a really good career overview of the myriad of different genres he worked in. And the one thing that will get its own chapter is the Bowery Boys, because he did nearly all of those, and so we'll discuss specifically his films in that series and their significance as being some of the better ones, like Bluesbusters, Let's Go Navy, Ghost Chasers. Some of the better Bowery Boys movies were helmed by Bodine.
Very cool. All right, and if people want to get a hold of you or how to find your books, it's plug time, so plug websites or emails or however you get in contact with you. And
you don't get the books from me, but you can buy them the usual channels like Amazon and Barnes & Noble. They're out there. I write for different publishers, so I can't say one specific publisher. I've worked for Scarecrow, Rogers and Roman and Littlefield and McFarland and Bear Manor and a lot of different publishers. So it's not one specific publisher. And that's the way to do it. I'm on social media. I'm on Twitter and Facebook, stuff like that. So I suppose if you search my name, you always got to put the middle initial, though. That's one thing I discovered on the internet. There's other people with my ridiculous name, and I never really realized that. But yeah, James L. Neibaur. The reason I used the little initial, I suppose you'd be able to find my website where I regularly do DVD reviews and book reviews of older films and different books. I've reviewed a few of your books over time, as a matter of fact.
Cool.
So you can probably find that. But yeah, pretty typical, pretty ordinary stuff.
Yeah. Well, in my case, my name's like John Smith. It's so common, but I've told people if you want to do a Google search to pick me out, just put Mark Arnold Historian, and that usually weeds out all the others.
Yeah, if you put my middle initial, you'll hit upon books and articles and stuff. And if you leave it out, you'll get somebody that isn't me, that lives in Idaho somewhere. I don't know.
All right. Well, it was a pleasure having you as a guest today, James. And any final comments or anything else to say before we let you go?
Well, I hope my interview came out better than my Bob Hope book, so that people won't stop listening to your program for any reason.
Well, as long as I don't erase it, we'll be fine.
We'll do it over again. I'll try to remember all my
exactly. Yeah, we have to do the same ad libs and everything else.
Yeah, right. Maybe they'll come up better this time.
Okay. All right. Well, I thank you very much, and
sure.
Have a good day. Talk to you soon.
All right, man. You too.
Mm-hmm. Bye. Thank you for listening, and thank you again, James Neibaur, for being my special guest. James wanted me to remind you of a book that we did not discuss on this podcast called The Charlie Chan Films. It's available on Amazon and from Bear Manor Media. Episode number 34 will be coming soon, and if you would like to comment and or be a guest on this podcast, please drop me a line at funideas.mark@gmail.com. Become a Patreon of Fun Ideas Productions. If everyone listening just contributed $1 a month, that would be a tremendous help. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel. This has been the Fun Ideas Podcast. This is Mark Arnold speaking. This episode is copyright 2019 Fun Ideas Productions. Thank you very much, and have a good night.